everyone, it's Katrina. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deep into the incredible discoveries that are being made right now. From hidden caves filled with glistening pearls to ancient secrets of alchemy finally being unraveled, we've got it all. And that's just the beginning. Millions of cave pearls. Cave pearls are one of the strangest geological phenomena ever. They appear in deep caverns throughout the world, ranging in size from grains of sand to softballs. But are they even worth anything? Whole pools of bizarre cave balls can be found in the tropics. At the recently explored Grutas de Canicas cave in Mexico, researchers found millions of cave pearls. They've even been found in the largest cave on the planet in Vietnam. The science behind cave pearls is fascinating. Each cave pearl is made through a concentration of calcium salts forming concentric layers around a small nucleus. Think about a snowball and you're on the right track. Something small like a grain of sand begins to accumulate layers of salt, growing larger and larger until you have a perfectly round ball. That's a cave pearl. And to answer the question of are they worth anything? Not really, they're just cool to look at. Not everything is about money. The ones in Sondung Cave are particularly exciting because they are gathered in rimstone pools, hundreds of them, making visitors feel as if they've entered an alien planet. It's the largest cave in the world by volume, only discovered about 30 years ago by a man named Ho Khan by accident while he was walking through the jungle. It wasn't officially reported as the world's largest cave until 2013. This world beneath our world has stalactites almost 300 feet tall. It has its own primeval rainforest, looking like the sort of place you would expect to find velociraptors and a few brontosaurus. It's so big, the cave has its own forest. Cave pearls aren't just a pretty face. There is a possibility that they could harbor microscopic life forms inside. They have many layers where remnants of ancient bacteria or other microorganisms could be trapped. If we can find a fossilized microbe in a cave pearl, this could revolutionize the history of life on Earth. There's a lot of cool stuff happening inside caves. Woolly mammoths in Canada. Pack your bags, guys. It's time to move to British Columbia, Canada, where scientists have found evidence of woolly mammoths. The Ice Age cousins of modern elephants were living in Western Canada much more recently than scientists have ever guessed. But just how recently? Is there still a mammoth or two hiding in the isolated old-growth forests? It's never really been a secret that mammoths lived in British Columbia. They roamed Vancouver Island in prehistory, as is evident by physical mammoth remains that have been discovered. But how long ago they disappeared has always been a matter of speculation. Scientists at Simon Fraser University decided they were going to get to the bottom of the mystery. The team, led by researcher Laura Termes, examined 32 mammoth samples taken from Vancouver Island. Only half the samples were suitable for radiocarbon dating. Each sample was tested and the results shocked the researchers. I'm sure somebody's mouth hit the floor. The youngest mammoth sample was 23,000 years old. The oldest sample couldn't be measured by radiocarbon dating at all. That means it must be older than 45,000 years. And this was big news. It means that mammoths were living on Vancouver Island for a really long time. They were likely still on the island when humans started migrating into North America. But when precisely did they go extinct, and how did it happen? Those are questions that scientists still have to answer. So did the last woolly mammoth die on Vancouver Island 23,000 years ago? Or is that just the oldest sample that's been found and dated so far? It's entirely plausible that woolly mammoths survived in the more remote parts of the island, perhaps even until recently. Perhaps Native American groups saw mammoths with their own two eyes. I can't guarantee that anyone is going to witness a mammoth on Vancouver Island, but you don't know if you don't try. Secrets of a Renaissance alchemist lab. Scientists have just revealed the bizarre experiments being performed by a famous astronomer from 17th century Europe. His name was Tycho Brahe, renowned around the world for his groundbreaking discoveries in the cosmos. When Tycho wasn't busy watching the stars, he dabbled in the mystical. You're not going to believe the elements found in his old laboratory. A team of scientists from the University of Southern Denmark were the ones behind this exciting new study. They carried out chemical analysis on several glass shards recovered from Tycho's lab about 35 years ago.
4 out of the 5 shards tested showed trace remains of enriched nickel, copper, zinc, tin, tungsten, gold, and mercury. That's a lot of elements to have smeared on a glass shard. Researchers think Tycho was using the ingredients in strange medical experiments.
Chemist Carl Lund Rasmussen from the research team said the high concentrations of certain elements came as an unexpected surprise, especially tungsten, seeing as it wasn't even identified as an element until 1781. How is it being used in a laboratory that was destroyed almost 200 years before it was even found?
It seems alchemists of old had access to materials they shouldn't have. It could be that Tycho was using tungsten without realizing what it was. Or it could be that alchemists knew more than modern scientists give them credit for. But what was he doing with all of these different elements? Was he trying to create the Philosopher's Stone? Not quite. Tycho Brahe didn't covet immortality. He wanted to help people, which you have to admit is pretty admirable when he could have been searching for eternal life. His experiments were to develop medicines that could treat things like syphilis, leprosy, and the Black Plague.
You don't have to worry about a bad case of leprosy today, but it used to be a big issue. There were lepers all over the place. You practically tripped over them on your way to the blacksmith, or wherever people went in the early 1600s.
I do want to mention one more thing about alchemy. Tycho and other alchemists of his day believed that the sun, gold, and the human heart all shared certain features. There was a connection between alchemy and astronomy because elements on Earth were connected to stars and planets.
If you had a bad heart, the simple remedy was to drink some gold. And now for number 9, but first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a huge thank you to Irene Welch and the Adventures of Enoch for supporting this channel. Thanks, guys! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about incredible recent discoveries. We've got a lot.
A real pot of gold.
Archaeologists have found a pot of gold. A real pot of gold. And they didn't even need to follow a rainbow to get it. The gold wasn't guarded by a leprechaun, it was just buried, likely at a time of great social upheaval. But there is a rather frightening story that goes along with the pot of gold.
The gold was found in Turkey by scientists at the University of Michigan, but the gold dates to the 5th century BC, when this part of Turkey belonged to the Greeks. The scientific team was excavating the courtyard of a house from the ancient city of Notion when they found the coins.
Archaeologist Christopher Ratt said the gold was buried in a corner of the building. They hadn't been expecting it, so it came as a big surprise. It was even more surprising when they dated the coins and found them to be even older than the house they were buried under. How does that make sense? Don't worry, we're going to get to the bottom of it.
The coins are called darics. 2,500 years ago, they were used by the Persians as a major currency. They were likely minted in the city of Sardis, about 60 miles from the ruins of Notion. The coins were often used to pay soldiers. A single darics equaled an entire month's salary for a soldier. That should give you an idea of how much money an entire pot full of coins was worth. Researchers didn't give an exact number, only saying they found a quote-unquote hoard. It's safe to assume the pot of gold had at least 100 coins in it, which would be like a year's worth of someone's hard-earned salary at least.
To solve the mystery of why the coins were buried, we need to investigate Notion itself. This city was a frequent site of military battles. For centuries, the Greeks and the Persians fought for dominion over the region.
For example, in 430 BC, Notion came under control of Persian sympathizers aided by Greek dissidents and barbarian mercenaries. Then, in 427 BC, the Athenians launched a major campaign to reclaim the city. Christopher Ratt believes this was when the coins were buried, and likely explains why nobody ever went back for them. When violence erupted in Notion, someone with a lot of money buried the pot of gold to keep it from the mercenaries. But that person must have died, so they could never dig up their gold coins. Then, someone built a house over the pot, not knowing they were literally sleeping on a fortune. Remember, this is why you always check for cash under your floorboards. You just never know where you might find your own personal pot of gold. The Titanic of the Alps.
You've heard of the Titanic before, but what about the Titanic of the Alps? It's a gigantic ship that was due to be raised from its watery grave in May 2024. 90 years after sinking to the bottom of Lake Constance, the Santis was supposed to rise from the depths like a wet metal phoenix. But it didn't. The salvage operation was a historic disaster.
The Titanic of the Alps got its nickname because it's a big ship that sank in the Alps. In 1933, the passenger ferry was deemed too expensive to keep running. Instead of taking care of the problem sensibly, the Santis was deliberately sunk. It's been sitting at the bottom of the lake along the borders of Germany, Switzerland, and Austria for nearly a century now. It's at a depth of about 650 feet. Swiss authorities gave the green light to the company's Ship Salvage Association to raise the boat in February. They tried in May and failed. The brakes on the cable winch didn't hold when they tried to lower the salvage platform to the bottom of Lake Constance. Raising a boat is a tricky operation, but not as complicated as you might think. The salvage platform is lowered down to the vessel, big balloons full of air are inflated, and the balloons float the ship to the surface. It's like strapping a life jacket onto a really heavy tin can. The cable winch had been built specifically for the operation, according to President of Ship Salvage Association, Silvan Paganini. The platform worked well to start, but then the ropes suddenly started falling. The platform sank uncontrollably and crashed into the sunken ship.
Everything is broken and cannot be repaired. It's a huge loss to everyone involved. The company was founded in 2023 specifically to salvage the old steamboat. And now they have to clean up their mess because they can't leave the platform at the bottom of the lake, but they won't even get the passenger ferry to the surface. Maybe somebody will try again next century.
Were our ancestors failed experiments?
A fossilized human jaw has reset the timeline for the history of human beings in Tibet. The jaw isn't from a member of the Homo sapiens family, but rather from one of our most mysterious ancestral cousins. The discovery takes us to the Vaishya Karst Cave, a dark and gloomy hole in the earth at the edge of the Tibetan plateau.
It's a holy place today, decorated with long strands of colorful prayer flags. For centuries, holy men have sought refuge in the isolated caverns. They crawl into the cool confines of caves to pray in silence, or to heal from sickness and disease. It's believed the caves hold supernatural healing properties. In 1980, one local monk going on a retreat into the caves found something he hadn't anticipated. That thing was a jaw with two giant teeth set into it. While it does appear human, it isn't entirely. It doesn't match with any human jawbone from today's humans. The initial discovery was made more than 40 years ago, but that's how long it's taken for scientists to make breakthroughs on the jaw. A new study was recently published in the scientific journal Nature, detailing what scientists have learned over the last 4 decades.
I'll start with the dating. The mandible is 160,000 years old. It comes from a group of ancient humans known as the Denisovans. They've been called the sister group to Neanderthals, but the truth is that modern scientists know almost nothing about them. No one even knew the Denisovans had existed until a few random bones were found in a cave in Siberia's frozen Altai Mountains. Since then, a handful of other bones have been found and the picture is starting to get a little clearer. There were a lot of Denisovans. There was a whole civilization of them. They were genetically different from Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, but still human. The jaw found in Tibet was 1,400 miles away from the bones found in the Siberian cave. The Denisovans clearly got around. But what happened to them? Where did they go? And were they the failed experiments of Anunnaki gods? There are theories that the Anunnaki, the gods worshipped by the Sumerians, created humans as a race of primitive slaves to mine gold in Africa around 200,000 years ago. What I'm wondering is if the Anunnaki made some mistakes. I mean, you can't just genetically engineer a whole species without making a few errors. Could the Neanderthals and Denisovans have been botched genetic experiments? And could that be why they went extinct? This is one of those fun theories where sci-fi combines with history. Mainstream scientists say the Denisovans split away from their Neanderthal relatives about 400,000 years ago. Neanderthals spread into Europe and Western Asia. The Denisovans spread into East Asia. Homo sapiens left Africa about 200,000 years ago. First, there were just a few of them wandering north.
Then there were huge waves of them. I say them, but I'm talking about us, our true genetic ancestors. What happened next can't be explained through a jawbone in a cave. Something happened when Homo sapiens left Africa that led to the absolute annihilation of all other human species. When we met the Neanderthals in the Middle East, we made babies with them. Then the Neanderthals went extinct. When Homo sapiens journeyed into Asia and met the Denisovans, we made babies with them too. And then they went extinct as well.
Scientists know this because modern-day Asians still have the genetic fingerprints of Denisovans in their DNA. Scientists recently found that it's thanks to the Denisovan genes that modern Sherpas are so well adapted to breathing the thin air of the high mountains.
The volatile volcanoes of Venus. Let's step off the planet for a minute and take a journey to the stars and look at the incredible volcanoes discovered on Venus. Venus isn't just the Roman goddess of love and beauty. Venus is also a volcanic hellhole. New research has shown that Venus's volcanoes are extremely active. They might be erupting at a similar rate to our volcanoes here on Earth. Let me drop some Venus facts for you to impress your friends with. Venus is the second closest planet to the Sun. It's almost the exact same size as Earth, but things aren't very comfortable on its surface. The atmospheric pressure is about 92% higher on Venus than on Earth. Its super thick atmosphere is made mostly of carbon dioxide. Instead of fluffy white rain clouds, Venus has clouds of sulfuric acid. Don't bother with an umbrella, the rain will just melt through it like droplets of lava. Basically, you don't want to have a picnic on Venus. It also happens to be the hottest planet in our solar system, with an average surface temperature of around 870 degrees Fahrenheit. That makes Death Valley look like Antarctica. As for the landscape, it's surprisingly similar to that of Earth. There's a reason people call Venus Earth's evil twin. It has sweeping plains, highlands, and heaps of volcanoes. When researchers recently looked at radar data of the planet, they found changes in the surface of Venus. The changes represent fresh lava flows, which is evidence of volcanic activity. But what does this mean, and why am I telling you about it? It means that Venus is geologically active, and that's a good thing. It means the planet isn't dead. Its volcanic heartbeat is still pounding loudly. Though that doesn't mean that humans are going to be colonizing Venus anytime soon. The ghosts of the plague. In Germany, archaeologists have found a lost medieval village from 1200 years ago. It was found by accident during a construction project. You never know what you're going to find beneath the old streets of Munich. When the Federal Office for Radiation Protection started their construction work, there was no sign of a town at the surface. There wasn't anything that would even suggest buried ruins. Then they started digging. Soon the construction workers realized they had stumbled upon a piece of history. They found traces of medieval houses, cellars, and even a church. Preliminary dating shows the village was still standing in the 9th century AD. This may not have been that big of a deal if not for what happened next. Archaeologists were called in to replace the construction workers. They then started uncovering human remains. The ruins of the church were surrounded by dead people. Researchers say that during the early Middle Ages, church burials were rare. You'd think it was the opposite, but the only people who were allowed to be buried on church property were typically those of high status. People with fancy positions in the church, for example. Who exactly these people were buried in Munich, researchers will likely never know. They were big shots in their time, and now they're just bones. Isn't that just the way life goes sometimes? The most exciting part of the discovery, though, involves everyone's favorite medieval malady. The abandonment of the village appears to coincide with the arrival of the Black Death, aka the Plague. The plague showed up in southern Germany in the early 14th century. At pretty much the exact same time everyone left the village. Is it possible they left due to the plague? Could the outbreak have wiped out a full generation of villagers? It must have been so bad that the village collapsed and no one ever moved into it again. That sounds like the premise for a good spooky movie. Halloween is coming up, right? World's oldest calendar. The ancient site of Göbekli Tepe has revealed even more secrets. The oldest temple in the world was home to the earliest known lunisolar calendar. What I'm about to tell you is hard to believe. Göbekli Tepe is the site in Turkey that dates to between 12,000 and 13,000 years ago, give or take a few years. It's known for potentially being the real location of the Garden of Eden. It's also famous for its mysterious drawings. Scientists have been trying to figure out what the bizarre symbols and unusual statues at Göbekli Tepe mean for years, and now they think they've figured it out. A new study was just published in which scientists scrutinize a single pillar. It's a lot of effort for one stone column, but this is a site that is 12,500 years older than Machu Picchu. Scrutiny of small things is important. On the pillar are 365 V-shaped symbols. That's a suspicious number, don't you think? There also happens to be 365 days in a year. Researchers believe that each V shape represents a day. They think the pillar is a calendar. In addition to the V symbols, researchers from the University of Edinburgh took a special interest in a carving of a beast. It looks kind of like a vulture, but no one really knows. It's not human, that much is for sure. The mysterious beast has a V shape carved around its neck. It's definitely connected to the pillar somehow. Researchers think the V on the beast represents the summer solstice constellation at the time it was carved. Someone carved the creature and then marked the month with a big V. That's the theory anyway. This is a profound revelation in human history. If scientists can unlock the secrets of Göbekli Tepe, we could be one step closer to understanding the origin of humanity. The carvings prove that whoever built the temple already had a calendar. Think about how impressed people are with the Maya calendar. But the Maya created their calendar around 2,500 years ago. The Göbekli Tepe pillar calendar was made 8,000 years earlier. Göbekli Tepe makes the Maya seem like last year's news. It makes Stonehenge seem like it was just built yesterday. I haven't dropped the real bombshell yet, but here it comes. Archaeologists suspect the calendar at Göbekli Tepe was created specifically to record a comet strike that triggered an ice age. According to a statement from the study team, they believe a comet hit the planet with such force that it triggered a shift in climate. It may have also triggered a global flood, something the Bible is convinced of. The climate shift then triggered a cultural shift amongst the humans of Göbekli Tepe, who formed a new religion surrounding the comet impact. This is crazy stuff. The team is essentially suggesting that the sudden dip in temperature kick-started religion. But it may have done more than that. It may have also motivated hunter-gatherers to start farming just to deal with the bitter cold. Farming then led to the development of society, which led to the development of writing, which led to the Greeks, the Romans, the Industrial Revolution, the atomic bomb. I don't mean to sound dramatic, but all of civilization could be traced back to Göbekli Tepe, and this calendar is proof of it. Strange burials in a Mexican cave. A very unusual burial was recently found in a cave in Mexico. Archaeologists found the remains of 2 teenagers and 1 baby. They are still trying to figure out who these people were, why they were left in a cave, and how they died. The answers might be a little too frightening. The burials are between 3,000 and 2,500 years old. They were found in the state of Nuevo León, far from the jungle cities of the Maya in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. The remains were discovered in pieces, with bones scattered about the burials. It's possible they had been ritually dismembered, but researchers aren't sure. They still need to conduct a detailed osteological analysis. You can already see how this discovery is a little disturbing. The deceased were also found with bits of baskets and textiles. They may have been buried in bundles of cloth. Researchers also found beads made from freshwater seashells. According to historian Alfredo Lopez Austin, who helped write a book about Mexico's indigenous past, the remains come from the pre-classic period. It was when the people of northern Mexico engaged in long-distance travel. They also hunted, gathered, and grew crops. The different tribes had different lifestyles, but that doesn't help solve the mystery of the cave bodies, though. Researchers can't figure out if they were sacrifices, victims of a murder, casualties of war, or what. If you have any ideas, let me know in the comments. The long-lost temple of Jesus' miracles. Archaeologists have just confirmed the discovery of the lost temple where Jesus performed miracles. This bombshell find has taken scholars and the church by storm. In the New Testament, it said that Jesus preached and performed healing miracles in a synagogue located in the city of Chorazin in Israel. Historical records place the temple as being in the modern Chorazin National Park. Christian pilgrims have been traveling there for years, even though the temple from the New Testament was long gone. In the early part of the 20th century, archaeologists found an ancient synagogue at the exact place where the Bible claimed that Jesus performed his miracles. The issue was that the synagogue only dated to 380 BC. Jesus had already been dead for almost 400 years by the time the synagogue was built. It couldn't possibly have been where he performed miracles. That's what archaeologists thought until now. While excavating the synagogue from 380 AD, the team of archaeologists found the ruins of an even older temple. This older temple dates to the era of Jesus Christ. Lead archaeologist Achia Cohen-Tavor from Dagesh Tourist Archaeology called the discovery groundbreaking. The team found giant boulders, pieces of pottery, coins, and other evidence of human habitation from the 1st century AD. The temple was in use when Jesus had his ministry and his apostles. This is one of those times where archaeology matches perfectly with what the Bible says. The book of Matthew says Jesus taught at a synagogue in the city of Chorazin. It also says that after the locals rejected Jesus and his teachings, he cursed them and their city. Jesus was like, you know what? You guys can just go and be cursed if you don't want to listen to what I have to say. Then Jesus went on to denounce the cities in which his works have been done because they weren't repenting. During this time, Jesus was a bit angry, like his vengeful Old Testament father. There is an ancient pathway between Chorazin and Capernaum, which Jesus is believed to have walked. The path is still there, though Christ's footprints are long gone. There is also a mysterious stone chair at the synagogue known as the Chair of Moses. It too is mentioned in the book of Matthew. The Bible says, "Then Jesus spoke to the multitudes and to his disciples, saying, 'The scribes and the Pharisees sat on Moses' seat.'" This could be that very seat, preserved for 2,000 years. Temple older than Machu Picchu. An ancient temple has been found in Peru that predates Machu Picchu by 3,500 years. That's a long time. The temple was discovered alongside a theater where some strange things may have been going on. The temple was found at the archaeological site of La Otra Banda. In June of 2023, the government alerted archaeologists of some looting that was going on near the town of Zana. Archaeologists went to investigate, and lo and behold, they found an entirely new site. Then the excavation started. Actually, the looters found the site. The excavated plot is tiny compared to the whole site. It's only 33 feet by 33 feet and about 6 feet deep. But in this small square, archaeologists found proof of ancient civilization. First, they identified ancient walls made of mud and clay. Research scientist Luis Muro Inonan said he was surprised that such ancient structures were found so close to the surface. As the researchers kept digging, they kept finding more stuff. They realized they were excavating a temple from 4,000 years ago. Then they found a theater, a staircase, and what looks like a stage. What archaeologists don't know is what was going on in the theater and how it may have been connected to the temple. Were the ancient people putting on plays? Were they ritual performances? Sacrifices? On one of the theater's staircases, archaeologists found mud panels carved with mythological creatures. These creatures match other images found at sites from what's known as the Initial Period. This was one of the most important periods for Peruvian cultures. Scratch that. It was one of the most important times globally. 4,000 years ago, religion began to play a major role in human civilization in Peru. This was when some of the earliest temples appeared. Something happened in 2000 BC that sparked a religious revolution. Myths, legends, strange creatures, fantastic fables, it all began in the Initial Period. Sadly, researchers don't actually know anything about the belief systems that emerged in the Andes. They don't know what people worshipped, and they don't know what religious rituals were being held. All we know about them comes from what they created. By the way, I should mention 2 other awesome discoveries were made in Peru recently. A tomb from 3,000 years ago that belonged to an elite religious leader was found in August, and a mummy from 1,000 years ago was unearthed on the outskirts of Lima. Be sure to check out more videos from the channel to learn about those. Thanks for watching!
Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Altar of the Serpent King. In 2018, archaeologists discovered a carved stone altar in the ancient Maya city of La Corona. Dating back nearly 1,500 years, the piece was found deep in the jungle of northern Guatemala. It's the site's oldest recorded monument from the classic Maya period, which lasted from 250 to 900 AD. The limestone altar features carvings that tell the story of the Penal dynasty, which began its 200-year rule by seizing power in the Maya lowlands region. They also detail the existence of a previously unknown king, according to La Corona Regional Archaeological Project Director Marcelo Canuto. Known as Chak Tuk Ichak, the ruler is depicted carrying a two-headed serpent. The inclusion of these animals makes perfect sense, since the Kanul dynasty rulers were known as the Snake Kings. The primary deities of the Kanul are also found intertwined with the snakes in the carvings. By studying the altar's carvings, researchers are learning more about how Kanul leaders expanded their power during the dynasty's early days. So far, it's become clear that La Corona played a major role in the kingdom's formation. Monte Brahma giants. While plowing their fields along Sardinia's west coast in 1974, farmers struck what they initially thought was a huge rock in the ground. It turned out to be a stone head, dating back to the Iron Age, and was the first of thousands of limestone fragments that archaeologists unearthed in the following decades. Put together, the pieces form dozens of massive 3,000-year-old statues, measuring as much as 7 feet tall. Known as the Monte Brahma giants, each statue was carved from a single limestone block. They bear distinctive features, including triangular faces, T-shaped eyebrows and noses, and large round eyes made up of concentric circles. The giants hold different objects, including bows and shields. Researchers have categorized them into warriors, archers, and boxers. It's generally agreed that the Monte Brahma giants had a symbolic power that unified the culture who created them, but nobody knows exactly what they represent. They are one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. Scholars initially assumed that the statues were part of a Carthaginian temple, but they turned out to be much older than that. The statues were likely built by the Nuragic civilization, which flourished between the 18th and 8th centuries BC. Known for their expert metal and stoneworking, the culture built over 6,000 distinctive megalithic structures, or nuragi, throughout Sardinia. These, like the Monte Brahma giants, are largely a mystery to archaeologists, and so are the reasons behind the Nuragic civilization's mysterious decline. Penal Colony Coin Stash. Located on the Australian island of Tasmania, Port Arthur was a 19th century penal colony that was known for housing the most hardened convicts. Prisoners were only sent here after they proved to be too difficult for staff to handle at more conventional penitentiaries. The rules of Port Arthur were extremely strict. Inmates lived in near constant solitary confinement and weren't allowed to interact with each other at all. They certainly weren't allowed to have money on them either, which is what makes this discovery so surprising. Archaeologists recently uncovered a stash of silver shillings beneath the prison's workshop, amounting roughly to the 1-week salary of an overseer. Project officer Silvana Sidzik told news outlets that while inmates were known to occasionally have coins, this was a substantial amount. The coins were found in the floor, where a prisoner likely hid them after stealing them from an officer. Whoever it was, they never made it back to the stash spot to retrieve the coins. This could have been because they fell under suspicion, or because they were transferred elsewhere for release, according to researcher Richard Tuffin. He added that the coins were probably stolen during the 1850s. An expert will examine the shillings, which are dated between 1814 and 1844. Only 10% of the prison population was working at any given time. Jobs were given to the best-behaved criminals because they often involved working with tools that could be dangerous if used for the wrong reasons. Entering prison as a skilled tradesman also helped an inmate secure a job. In addition to the coins, archaeologists have found handmade gambling tokens, tobacco pipes, and metal products. Fraudulent Medieval Map. The Vinland map made news headlines in 1965 when Yale University announced the discovery of the supposed medieval rendering of North America. Scholars claimed that it was one of the oldest maps of the continent and cited it as evidence that Vikings reached the western Atlantic during the 15th century. But many experts questioned the Vinland map's authenticity from the get-go. Its origins could only be traced as far back as 1957, when an antiques collector bought it from an unknown European source. and its ink crumbles in a way that's never been seen with medieval ink. The map also seemed suspiciously accurate for the time period it was attributed to. In 1973, a group of researchers declared the map a forgery, but many still wanted to believe it was real, and the debate raged on until recently. Yale experts have finally declared with certainty that the Vinland map is a fake. During a recent study, they found that the ink contains a titanium compound that didn't appear in ink until the 1920s, ruling out the possibility that it was as old as researchers originally thought. It's especially important to solve mysteries like this, according to Raymond Clemens, curator at Yale's Rare Book Library. Speaking with news outlets, he pointed out that fraudulent artifacts like the Vinland map soak up a lot of intellectual airspace. Clemens further explained that whoever created the map was very skilled, as evidenced by its ability to fool and confuse many talented scholars over the years. The map will remain in Yale's collection, despite being a proven forgery. In fact, the story behind it is what makes it a fascinating artifact in its own right. Pompei Slave Room. The recent discovery of a bedroom shared by a slave family near Pompeii is shedding light on some of the harsher realities of life in ancient Rome. Found in the suburb of Civita Giuliana, the cramped room contains 3 beds, a chamber pot, and a wooden chest filled with objects made from fabric and metal. There were no decorations on the wall, and the only natural light came in from a small window. A year ago, archaeologists found the remains of a master and slave in the same villa. These discoveries offer unprecedented insight into the precarious reality of people who seldom appear in historical sources. In the words of Pompei Archaeological Park Director Gabriel Zuchtriegel, underneath the beds, the team found personal belongings including amphorae, which functioned as storage containers, and ceramic jugs. The beds were made from wood and rope, and one is child-sized. Zuchtriegel pointed out that while the items found in the room may not be considered treasures in a traditional sense, they are treasures because they convey the experience of ancient society's most marginalized members. Ancient theater bathroom. Archaeologists have just discovered the remains of what appears to be a communal toilet at a 2,000-year-old theater in the ancient city of Smyrna. Located in modern-day Turkey, the bathroom was built in the 2nd century AD and remained in use until the 5th century. The shared commode is the first of its kind ever found within a stage building, according to a statement from the Izmir Metropolitan Municipality. Measuring 16 inches high, the U-shaped structure accommodated 12 to 13 people at a time. It was accompanied by a 3 to 4 inch trough for clean water. Experts believe that the latrine was reserved for actors rather than audience members. The theater contains a larger toilet that was open to the public. People who used the facility would have cleaned themselves with a shared sponge on a stick, which they rinsed off in the nearby trough of flowing water. In today's society, the idea of going to the bathroom in front of other people is appalling to most, but it was just a part of everyday life for the ancients, and it was even seen as a chance to socialize. After all, you might as well catch up while you're sitting there. Medieval propaganda. Edward of Woodstock, better known as the Black Prince, became heir to the English throne when he was born in 1330. He went down in history for securing several victories in France during the 100 Years' War, which led to the capture of French King Jean II. Oddly, nobody knows how the Black Prince got his nickname, which first appeared in the historical record during the 16th century. When he was dying from dysentery in 1376, he drew up a will dictating that he wanted his effigy to be made from metal and fully armed in plate of war. Researchers have said that this wish was unprecedented for its time. The Black Prince's father, King Edward III, died the following year. At just 10 years old, the Black Prince's oldest son, Richard II, rose to the throne. The Black Prince's effigy is made from the exact same materials as that of his father. New research points out that this suggests they were made by the same person at around the same time. Historical records show that marble for Edward III's tomb was transported to England by ship in 1386. At the time, Richard II had recently put down a peasants' revolt and was struggling to uphold his power. Records show that he was engaged in numerous projects to commemorate his family's legacy, perhaps as a way to assert his authority now that he was an adult. Consequently, the new study proposes that the Black Prince and Edward III's effigies were created around 1386 as medieval propaganda. Unfortunately for Richard II, his attempts at maintaining an upper hand over his subjects failed. He was deposed in 1399 at the hands of his own cousin, King Henry IV. and he died a year later. A Roman battle site. During the 1st century BC, the Romans clashed with a local tribe in a remote part of southeastern Switzerland. Artifacts have turned up at the site over time, but until recently, the authorities believed that the site had been completely cleared of anything with archaeological value. They were recently proven wrong by Lucas Schmid, a dentist who spends his spare time volunteering with his local archaeological association. Using his metal detector to scour the site for hidden artifacts, Schmid found a 2,000-year-old Roman dagger. Speaking with reporters, he said that the metal detector's signal was faint, and he never would have guessed he'd encountered such a major find. Intrigued by the discovery, an archaeological team excavated the property and found hundreds of artifacts, including slingshot stones, coins, nails, and part of a shield. The findings mark the first time a Roman battlefield has been identified in Switzerland. Roman archaeology expert Peter Schwartz told SWI that he believes around 1,500 men participated in the fight, making it a small battle compared to some of the other skirmishes the Romans fought elsewhere in Europe. Researchers hope to narrow down the date of the battle to connect it to a decree that Roman Emperor Augustus issued in 15 BC to seize control of the region. No grave sites have been found, so nobody yet knows how many soldiers died in the battle. Excavations are ongoing and will hopefully yield more information about what exactly happened at the site. Oldest footprints in the Americas. The discovery of 23,000-year-old footprints in New Mexico's White Sands National Park has dialed back the earliest known human presence in North America by at least 10,000 years. The footprints were imprinted into an ancient lake bed over a several thousand-year period during what's known now as the last glacial maximum. It looks like children and teenagers walked along the shoreline before the glaciers of the last ice age melted. The discovery marks a turning point in the seemingly endless debate over who first stepped foot into the Americas and when. Some researchers argue that people reached the continent even earlier than the footprints were made. It's possible, but for now, evidence of these claims remains scarce. The fossilized footprints are a game changer because their dating seems accurate, proving that people reached the continent during a time when researchers previously thought ice sheets blocked them from entering. For this reason, experts believed until recently that North America's first humans were a group known as the Clovis people, who arrived around 13,000 years ago. Now they face the question of not if someone arrived before the Clovis people, but who and when. Egyptian official's tomb. Ta-em-Wea was an ancient Egyptian official who lived over 3,200 years ago. He wore several hats under Pharaoh Ramses II, including head of treasury and the chief supervisor of livestock. His job as the head of treasury was likely a bit different than it would be in modern times. During Ramses II's reign from 1279 to 1213 BC, minted coins didn't yet exist. Instead, people paid for things using goods, rations, and precious metals as currency. He had a pretty complicated and important job then, sorting and accounting for all of these items. Archaeologists recently discovered Ta-em-Wea's tomb at Saqqara, a vast necropolis that served as a burial ground for ancient Egypt's most elite figures. The burial contains artwork depicting people leading cattle and other animals to ritual slaughter. There are also engravings of a man, perhaps Ta-em-Wea himself, sitting on a horn-like object near a collection of jars. Experts are working to decipher hieroglyphs found above some of the carvings. One of the inscriptions seems to convey that one of Ta-em-Wea's job duties was to make divine offerings at one of Ramses' many temples in Thebes. No human remains have been found in the burial so far, but the excavation is ongoing, and more discoveries may be waiting to be made. Thanks for watching! Would you like to learn about more incredible archaeological discoveries? You've come to the right place, so be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and check out some more of our videos. See you next time! Bye!